Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Story of the Researcher, the podcast, where we bring you thrilling and exciting experience of some of our formidable scientists and researchers in their own field of expertise. This is to inspire the younger generation to enhance mentorship and to promote the respect of the societal respecting of our distinguished scientists and researchers. In today's episode, we host one of the most distinguished honorable researchers in the field of agricultural biotechnology, originating from Kano State, of course. And he has over 20 years of experience in research, in teaching, in policy making, working with different African countries. It is really, really exciting to have him despite his commitments. Dr. Abdul Razak Ibrahim, welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, Zaid, for this opportunity. For me, really, it's a great pleasure and honor to be here. I believe conversations like this, which brings science closer to people, they are crucial for building the future we want. So I'm really excited to share parts of my journey and hear the thoughts of our vibrant audience. I don't know
Thank
how
you.
many of them are following us right now, but I just want to, express gratitude for being able to be part of this discussion today. Thank you so much.
We're really happy. And in case you are joining us now, this is the Science Communication Hub Nigeria, hosting Dr. Abdul Razak Ibrahim. So the nature of our podcast today will be in the simple tone and will be operating based on four themes. We will be starting with the background and motivation of our researcher, then we'll be moving into his research on biotechnology, then we will discuss his leadership and innovation, and eventually we will cap everything with the vision of the future because it's a rare opportunity to hear from people with a lot of experience. In case you have any questions, you can put it in the comment section, which we will be able to read at the end of the session. Um, so the first question I will have for you, Dr. Ibrahim, is could you start by sharing your journey with us from the level of inspiration? Especially, you have a very, very unique background of intersecting technology, molecular biology with agriculture, which is not something we see often in Nigerian universities. So, what is the inspiration and what is your journey so far?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. So first of all, I think it's important I clarify
Yeah.
that I'm from a place called Kura, local
Hmm.
government in Kano, Nigeria. It's in
With a lot
northern
of
Nigeria.
rights.
Exactly. So I have been to every time I go to meetings, all over Africa and globally, people ask where are you from, and then I say I'm from Nigeria. I say, you Nigerian? How? You cannot be from Nigeria. The Nigerians we know are usually very loud, because they're used to seeing other values from Nigeria.
Exactly.
So the caveat is I'm from Kura. We are probably the largest cluster of smallholder farmers and growers of rice. So I grew up there. If you're passing from Kura to Kano, there's a junior Arabic secondary school. I went to that school. I attended an Arabic school, and and growing up there, my elder brother at the time, he exposed me to English literature. He would present to me books. I don't know how many people know SMO Aka. There was this author, Nigerian author. His name is SMO Aka. So he had some very interesting fiction stories back then. So I would read through them. I was really deeply immersed in the world of Shakespeare, Charles
Mhm.
Dickens, the classic English literature. I was really captivated by that. So I went into science secondary school, Kafri in Hausa, wanting to become a lawyer, mass communicator of some sort, because I was always
Mm.
enchanted and captivated by words and how to use them to change lives. But then, science found me, and I went on to study biochemistry in BUK up to the level of PhD. But in that process, I actually discovered that, well, DNA is actually the largest, literally masterpiece ever written, because
Mm,
DNA is alive, it is dynamic, it edits itself, it produces copies of itself. So it's almost like a living a manuscript. So
mm,
in that sense, I would say that, that's my inspiration for science, for molecular biology. And then in the field of agriculture, it became my passion because I think it is the most human of sciences. It connects life, uh, it connects dignity and development. So for me, working in this intersection of molecular biology, foresight, food systems transformation, innovation, scaling technology, you know, it means writing new stories of hope and resilience across Africa. So that has been my inspiration in the work that I do today.
wow. That's really nice. It's like me hearing Shakespeare speaking. So you value Shakespeare and the DNA. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah. So after that, so what happened? How did you find yourself in Brazil?
Yeah. So after graduating from Bio University Kano, I was I went for NYC in Abia and came back Abia State. And that's how come, because some people, they do ask me this question. I speak a number of languages, including
Yeah.
Igbo.
Wow.
So I discovered that I have that talent also for languages. So for me, every time I hear a new word, I am able to repeat it.
Mm,
So when I discovered that, after, in addition to the little Arabic that we speak, because I went to an Arabic school, then the English, Hausa, and I discovered that I could speak Igbo, I told myself, okay, then I can always create an additional space for another language. So so when I was one of the people selected by the then governor of Jigawa State in 2000 to set up probably one of its kind, the first in the country, a research institute. So he founded Sami Turaki, Excellency Sami Turaki. He founded Jigawa Research Institute, and people were employed across Kano and Jigawa. We were all Jigawa had just been created, not quite long. So although I was from Kano, but I managed to get into the Jigawa Research Institute, and together we we set up the Jigawa Research Institute, and I was leading the biotech program.
mm,
Now, in that biotech program, and the overall boss, the director general of the institution, was someone called Hilton Gomez. He was a Brazilian. He came from the Brazilian
mm,
system. So when the institute got some funding from UNDP to train its staff, I was sent to Brazil to learn the techniques of tissue culture, plant transformation and tissue culture. So in the 6 months that I spent in Brazil at the time, I was able to pick up the Portuguese language. So within 6 months, I could speak. So my supervisor at the time said, "Oh, if you're
wow.
this, interested in the language, maybe I should offer you a space here. You come back here and do your masters."
Mm,
So he showed me a link, literally, mentored me on how to apply for Brazilian scholarship. So when I
mm,
came back, I applied for it, and I got the scholarship, and I went back to do my masters. Uh, After a while, I came back, and then I went back again to do my PhD. So through this interaction, and beginning even earlier, even before the masters, I think there was something also that happened that I must really state.
mm,
I was part of the privileged few at the time, I think sometime in 2001, when Nigeria held a national stakeholder consultation on drafting the country's biotechnology policy. So at
Mm.
the time, there was no NABDA, there was no agency really coordinating agriculture, biotechnology as a whole. And in that meeting, I was the youngest guy at the time. And I was really impressed and inspired by the many people I saw in that meeting. Some of them, again, they thought I was not from Nigeria. This
Mm.
guy, probably they brought the Sudanese to the meeting. So, so I saw people, and one of them, remarkably, I never forget him, is one called Professor Funsho Shanaya. He was the
Mm.
lead facilitator of that workshop. And the way he conducted himself during that meeting, the workshop, the way he was very well articulated, and he spoke about the big issues of what Nigeria needed to do. We in the end came up with a paper, that should guide the country in terms of designing its own biotech agenda.
Mm.
And I was completely blown away by that, by Professor Shonaya. And I became really inspired. And I told myself at the time, said, I want to be like this man. So the reason why I'm bringing this story is to say that, uh, I have been standing on the shoulders of others. Even from the junior Arabic secondary school that I mentioned, I was really supported and inspired and motivated and mentored by one of our teachers, very, very famous in Kura at the time.
Mm.
His name is Malam Ibrahim Adamu. He's currently special advisor, I think, I think advisor to the governor of Jigawa State. So he was the first person to really spark, this idea of knowing your worth, knowing yourself. Look, you are good in this, you're good in biology, you're good in chemistry, go for it. And he encouraged me, became like a family. So in my journey, I've stood on the shoulders of this people that have really helped. And that is what uh, puts me up there
Mm.
to recognize opportunities and go for it. So um, that's
Yeah.
that's been,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
that's been,
That's really exciting. And you made mention of you being mentored and standing on the shoulder of giants, and it just resonates in me the words of Isaac Newton, and that is exactly why we have this, because we wanted to enhance mentorship. Because definitely, if you really wanted to go far, then you need your elders to guide you through their experience and show you what you're worth, and lots more. So, in the little you have told us, Prof, I've seen the intersection of some experiences you've had in Nigeria, in Brazil, a lot of interaction between the big boys in the field of biotechnology as well as in agriculture, and from where you have, like, in simple terms, sorry, how can you describe the state of food security in Nigeria? Just simply.
okay. Yeah, I'll put it very simply and plainly too. Nigeria is a land of enormous agricultural gifts. There's no doubt about it. But our food security remains fragile. Fragility. We are in a very fragile situation. We face multiple pressures. There's climate change, there's
Hmm.
infrastructural gap, there's policy fragmentation, and then there's limited access to innovation on the part of the smallholder farmers. So these 4 points that I've mentioned, they are now compounded by the security challenges that we have. And for all of them, really, if you address the science components of them, if you approach them using the scientific approach, you can really tap into the potentials that we have.
Hmm.
Uh, but
Uh,
potentials, we cannot, you don't eat potentials. You have to really do something about the potentials that you have.
yeah.
Otherwise, millions will continue to face food insecurity every day. So, this reality that I've just described, the challenges that we have, is a call to action on the part of not just the government, the researchers, the policymakers, entrepreneurs, and so
Mm.
on. I saw recently someone said that the best companies in Nigeria are yet to emerge, are yet to come. And I think it's true because when you look at the enormous potential that we have, when you have you traveled from Gaia to Gashua, for example, traveled from Gaia to
Mm.
to Kirikasama to Birniwa, the land there. You go all the way up to Kazori Daura that way in Kura, Niger State. I'm talking just about the north. Now, if you go down south, those cassava belts we have in the southeastern region and some parts of southwest. Those are gold mines rather, that we are sitting on. And really, the potentials are quite high if we deploy the right science, create
Mm.
the right innovation ecosystem, supported by the right policy and attitude, on the part of entrepreneurs and investors. So again, to summarize plainly, Nigeria's situation in terms of food security, Nigeria is a land of enormous gifts, but our food security remains fragile due to
Yeah.
these factors that I've mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And that is really, really, that is just a mixed feeling between kind of happiness and the sorrow and hope as well. So does that kind of motivate you towards your the things you have been doing? And if yes, like what? How do you have any plan, like hypothetical plan?
Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely. It motivates me. The challenges should motivate us. Um, One of the things I have also learned, I was young, still am, I think, in a way.
Yeah.
Uh, I've come across many young people who tend to complain, who tend to complain about things, complain about politicians, complain about,
That is
system.
the thing in
Yeah.
Nigeria actually.
Yeah, but that's really a lazy way of approaching things. You really have to think and look within and do your own part. So for me also, and I think for many people, it's a daily motivation. What will work? What should work? Within my own little space. So I have three suggestions broadly, and I think they apply as much as in Nigeria, as much as probably to any African country and even globally. Number
Yeah.
one, we need, like I said, to build an inclusive innovation ecosystem where farmers, researchers, private sector actors, and policymakers collaborate and not operating in silos. And I will explain to you exactly what I mean by this.
Yeah.
I'll bring my experience from Brazil. I was in Brazil, put together some about 10 years, my experience, from Brazil. And when I was doing my PhD on the bench,
Mm.
I was working in a center called Embrapa, Center for Genetic Resource and Biotechnology. And
Yeah.
basically they put you in a lab. You have a bench. You're
Mm.
part of you're part of a molecular breeding program. But in that program, Zaid, you
Yeah.
are daily you're daily in contact with farmers, with
Daily.
people, yeah, policymakers. You see them, you see journalists, communicators come to the lab, really trying to find out what you're doing. So the problem you are trying to address as a researcher is not something that you sat down arrogantly as a scientist and came up with. No, it's a
Mm.
problem that has been discussed and articulated by all the stakeholders.
Of the
And that
society.
discussion, yeah, and that discussion offers what we call the innovation ecosystem
Mm.
because it challenges you. You see the problem. So, although I was doing the pipetting, the gel electrophoresis, the Western and Southern blots, and whatever, I was doing the sequencing, isolating DNA, running gel daily. But I was also going to the field. I was also watering plants. I was also mixing manure. I was
Mm.
also interacting with farmers, just knowing what exactly are the problems, so that at the end of the day, you are putting a product on the table when you are graduating. So by the time I was graduating from
Mm.
Universidade Federal de Brasilia,
Yeah.
I I had invented, along with colleagues, a technology for the control of white fly. You see what I mean? So that
Yeah.
is what I mean by innovation ecosystem. We need to create, and I was there. I was just, who's this guy? A guy from Kura, you
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
in
And,
that
and,
space.
and that is exactly what is like in our education system. I remember when I was in undergraduate, and I remember the field that my department has been kind of running postgraduate for about 30 years. And I asked them, you guys run postgraduate, you are supposed to answer a question for the society, but you have never had anything that made the headlines of the media.
Mhm.
I was naive, but I was like asking, what are you guys doing? So I think
Yeah,
we need a kind of information, and especially with that your experience, I think with GMOs, I think it will speak in the next sector of our
sure,
talk. So
sure.
yeah, in case you are joining us now, or in case you will be seeing our podcast on demand, we are hosting today Dr.
Mhm.
Abdulrazak Ibrahim, who is a formidable researcher in the field of biotechnology as well as molecular biology. We have just finished discussing some of his background, his motivation, and the challenges facing our dear nation, Nigeria. Now we will transition into the second section, which is kind of really intertwined with what we have just started discussing. And among your kind of the things you have done, and I see the inspiration. It's kind of like coming down from your experience in Brazil. You have pioneered the establishment of a biotechnology program in Nigeria. So what are these programs? What is the mission? What is the vision? And what achievements have you were able to achieve through this kind of programs in Nigeria so far?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, I will quickly try to conclude the last segment. I mentioned that there are three things we needed to do.
Three
So
things.
the first is about
Exactly.
building a strong and inclusive innovation ecosystem. And and I gave you the example of my experience in Brazil. The second is to create opportunity for young people to lead through agribusiness incubation, access to technology, venture capital that are tailored to agriculture. In Kano, for example, I see a lot. I, I if I, I always say that you cannot live in Kano or any of our agricultural hubs and really be educated and not think of an idea, an entrepreneurial idea. But then, government needs to support that opportunity. The third thing is
Mm.
to embed strategic foresight in our agricultural policy. So it's about planning, not just for today, planning not just for the yield that you will have on wheat tomorrow, but also planning for demographic shifts, planning for eventual market disruptions, planning for what could possibly go wrong in the future in terms of security and so on. You know, just imagine if we had had a foresight activity, a foresight analysis 10, 20 years ago
Mm.
that somehow envisioned the outcome of our food security in the context of the Boko Haram crisis, for example.
Yeah.
We would have done something about the food security issue back then. So to come to the question about
Yeah.
the biotech programs in Nigeria,
Mm.
you know the vision, and I gave you the story of my participation in crafting the first national policy on biotech,
Yeah.
and how I have supported the great work many people are doing in Nigeria. For example, the Open Forum for Agricultural Biotechnology, I at the Institute for Agricultural Research in ABU Zaria, they have developed transgenic crops, and they have really put them out in the market. So the vision was quite clear: is to bridge the gap between scientific innovation and rural transformation. And I think people, again, I would refer to him, Excellency Samuel Turaki. He understood this. He understood the need to bridge the scientific gap and rural transformation by setting up, that research center, the Informatics Institute as well. and so on. So we build capacity of people through workshops, fellowships, establish advocacy platforms like the OFAP. There's great work being done by my very good friend, Dr. Rose Gidado. She's in Nabat. It contributed in setting up Nigeria's biosafety legal framework, such that today, Nigeria and the institutions in Nigeria, the sector institution, Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Science and Technology, Trade and Industry, we are not just consumers of biotechnology, we are also becoming creators and regulators, shaping solutions that are adopted across African realities. And we have become leaders of the biotech. But again, this does not mean that there are no challenges. Still a lot needs to be done. But Nigeria actually has come quite a long way in terms of advancing
Hmm.
the biotech sector. And I think we deserve a tap on the back. I mean, not me, the country,
Yeah.
and you know,
Well.
in the things that we're doing, and hopefully, more governments will continue to support this transition so
Hmm.
that we can strengthen our biotech industry.
Exactly, and I think we will be getting there. And I'm really glad to hear this because what I'm thinking with the reality on the ground of people complaining that they cannot afford to feed themselves, their families, I thought that probably we are far behind. But there is a glimpse of hope in saying that in the strategic ecosystem, this is one component being achieved. And what we need is the policy implementation. And we hope we're gonna have some policymakers that are listening to this podcast and will hear the blueprints from the experts. So among one of the things you have achieved and that through probably a funding for Brazil, you have you pioneered or like you founded or a transgenic plant to the you were able to engineer I love that word to engineer a transgenic plant in northern Nigeria. For the sake of our audience, what are transgenic plants?
Mhm. Okay, uh, so transgenic plants, these are plants or crops that have had their genetic makeup engineered to contain an external trait that seeks to solve a problem. So, for example, let's
Hmm.
say you have a maize plant that is tall, right? It
Yeah.
produces very good corn, but because it is tall, it does not adapt to the windy situation.
Hmm.
And then you have another plant that is short, but it doesn't produce a lot of grain. So what you do is identify what is the gene responsible for that shortness in this plant, put it in this plant that produces a lot of grains. So you put two traits together so that you have a sort of a compromise. You have a plant that is not only able to resist the wind, but it also produces a lot of. So this is just a hypothetical example I'm giving.
Hmm.
This this foreign DNA that you have taken from the tall plant, put it in the short plant. It could come from another plant, or it could come from another organism, which can be a bacteria.
Oh.
All right. So basically, transgenic crops are crops that have their genome, the sum total of their genetic information, altered to express certain traits. So you can put traits that makes them resistant to drought, resistant to certain pests and disease. I'll give the example of what I generated myself.
Yeah.
So what did we do? We engineered a lettuce plant that is resistant to whitefly. Whitefly is an insect, very white, tiny insect. If you grow cowpea, for example, beans, you see it in the field. The problem of that insect is that it sucks the saps from the
Hmm.
plant, but in the process, so it sucks the sap and takes away nutrients. But in the process, also, it transmits virus to the plants. So what we did was to design a lettuce plant that produces indigenous insecticide that kills that insect
Hmm.
using a gene from the insect. So
Itself.
we yes, we went to the cell of the insect, picked up a sequence of a gene coding for something called vacuolar ATPase. We put it in the gene of the lettuce in the cell and generated a new plant. This plant, when we expose it to white flies, the white flies, when they feed on them, they die.
Hmm.
And the reason is because they have been engineered with something from that white fly which triggers a sort of suicide. It
Hmm.
triggers the, the insects to
Is
to
it suicidal and kills themselves?
yeah, sort of. This is just a way of putting it. But the name of that technology is RNA interference. So
Hmm.
it triggers the production of what is known as siRNA, small interference RNA molecules, which kill the insect. And that technology is actually advanced today. You know, we put it patent in Brazil, and it's been tested and applied in other crops like soybean. So
Hmm.
you, but you know, despite all this, right? Uh, Let me just say that GMOs, genetically engineered crops, they are not magic bullets, right? But they
Hmm.
are also not monsters that people make them out to be.
And that is exactly what I wanted to ask, because I know
Yes.
in Europe there is a
Hmm.
lot of pains against GMOs. In fact, there are some group of people, like, even if you got, like, it have to be clearly designated in the mall that these crops are GMOs, or like the organic, and the organic are more expensive and people go for the organic. Why do
Exactly.
people, like, despite it's seen we see that science is trying to give us like good hope, because this is profit for the
Hmm.
agriculture, it's like an easy cultivation and food for the people. What is the resentment towards GMOs?
Very, very good question. Very important. Probably most of our viewers will probably hang on to this question than any other points. But you know, I want to say this. Like I said, GMOs, they are neither magnetic magic bullets or monsters. They are simply one tool from many other tools. So you need to develop them responsibly and in a transparent manner. They can
Hmm.
help to solve real challenges like in Africa, especially like climate volatility and so on. But this does not mean that they will solve all our problems. They are just one of the other tools, one of the many tools that can be employed to address our food security problem. And the reason, you know, what you see in uh, the rejection from Europe and some
Hmm.
other parts of
Yeah.
the world, because you know this rejection is not there in Brazil, in Southern America, it's not there in China, and it's not there in some parts of Africa now. The reason is because there's more to the debate than just the technology. There's the economic dimension of the debate, and I'll throw it here.
Yeah.
Just think about it.
Okay.
Where do you think that most of the companies that produce insecticides and pesticides come from?
Hmm. Okay.
You don't
That's
have to answer. You don't have to answer. Now,
yeah. Hypothetically, I'm thinking of something.
now, now imagine that you have a technology where those insecticides and pesticides are not needed. It means you're putting out those companies from
Out
the
of business.
market, out of business. So it will not be in their interest that you develop a technology that does not require their products, what they sell, because the crops that stand to benefit from this technology, from GM technology, for example, are mostly grown in the tropics. They're in Southern America, they're in Africa, they're in parts of China. your competitor will never ever support you to have access to a technology that will make you free from using their products.
I think I
So,
love this answer very well.
so, but this does not mean that you should just use
Embrace GMOs, like,
embrace it complete.
and
You have to use it responsibly. You
yeah,
have to build public trust. You
mm,
have to have that what we call inclusive delivery of innovation.
yeah,
I was in Nairobi 2 3 weeks ago during the CGIAR Science Week, and we were
mm,
talking about inclusive delivery, and I was citing an example of imagine if, as an institution, you're running a breeding program where part of the people, the team that is helping you do that breeding program is a woman group where those women are actually participating in developing the technology. They're seeing it. They see what you're doing. They go to the field with you and so on. If you
mm,
involve them, adoption will be very, very high at the end of the day. But if you just go sit in the lab and you do your science, you publish your papers in Nature and Science, you become professor, you get that, you drive the technology, bring it to the market,
yeah,
you know, it's you. And sometimes you don't even need the GM crop. Sometimes what you need is a simple change in practice in the way you till the land, maybe in
mm,
the amount of fertilizer you apply,
yeah,
maybe in the ratio of the sodium,
yeah,
nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus
mm,
you apply. So it is the innovation ecosystem, the collective action, having people from all the different sector
mm,
working together, whether it is through biotech or through the conventional breeding program. So you have to combine sustainable practice, improve seed, better irrigation, improve market system, and then biotechnology can help
doing that.
African farmers, yeah, to leapfrog and address challenges. So like pests, like drought, like soil degradation. So it's not a
Yeah,
magic bullet that solves the problem. And I would like to say this point. I think very important. We have been on this debate for 15 years now, at least since
10
I've,
years. Yeah,
we have
because
been on this
the issue of
debate.
GMO, it's
Even
been,
more, even more. I'm referring to the context of Nigeria. We have been on this debate for 15 years now, where do we do GMO or we don't do. Now there are new technologies emerging. There's a new technology called gene edited crops, right? So these are crops that are not technically, you cannot call them GMOs because you're not putting foreign DNA into them.
you just use CRISPR to
Yeah,
kind of,
exactly. You're using CRISPR to engineer them, and they express certain traits that are desirable. So the regulation required in their release and adoption are different from the
mm,
ones for GM crops. And while we are stuck in that debate, this technology has arrived. So we missed that GM debate. We missed that
and,
GM opportunity that we could
and we
have
are not,
used,
we, that
you
is a
know.
very big leap. I hope you
And
are
what is
prepared.
even worse? No, no, what is even worse, Zaid, and I have to say this, what is even worse is that with all this controversy going on, some people will come in through the back door and introduce the GM and the non-GM and the CRISPR crop. So what this calls for is you have to be conscious. Don't sit at the back, sit government fund research. Please, we
Mm,
have to fund our research. There,
policymakers.
yeah, there is no way someone from China, US, Europe will support you with any form of technology, any form of innovation, if you do not invest in your own research. And I gave you an example earlier when we were discussing. I was in our lab, part of a breeding program back in Brazil, where,
Yeah,
yeah, in
and
the in this,
I
mm,
think I have something interesting over there because I have seen your pictures with some of the big top guys in Nigeria. Like I've seen your picture with the former president Olusegun Obasanjo and other as well of the big stakeholders. And I have kind of like a question that has been burning in me for quite a while now,
Mm.
and it's about, for example, now in Kano State, the kind of like the largest producers of flour and kind of anything flour related like the spaghetti and things. It belongs to companies like Dangote, like Boa, and these people are from those regions. Why do we lack people investing in a large scale agriculture in northern Nigeria? For example, like you said, from Kasama to Gashua or something like that, have a farmland owned by a single person that will be able to have all this inclusive, innovative ecosystem,
Mhm.
the chain from down to up, the company, the research, because we need companies that are going to fund research as well. We need companies that are going to sponsor PhDs. We need companies that are going to do the agriculture in our lands. But why is that happening? Why don't we have these guys investing in agriculture and have like very big, like people that kind of farm like in large scale?
Yeah, like I said, I listed those three points that I listed. The number one, you really have to have the innovation ecosystem in place,
Yeah.
and that starts with government being really very deliberate. There's something called CADAP, Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program.
Mm,
It is a commitment that every African Union member country has made to invest in agriculture so that we can double our productivity, we can reduce our post harvest loss, we
mm,
can triple intra Africa trade. And the numbers are such that, for example, you need to dedicate 10% of your GDP on agriculture. But I ask you, what's the percentage that's dedicated right now in Nigeria? I think it's less than that. All right. So if you come down to state, for example, Kano needs to invest certain level, certain percentage, reasonable, scientifically established percentage of its budget to agriculture, and not just agriculture, the farming or
mm,
buying fertilizer. I'm not talking about subsidy. No, I'm talking about even research, bringing, establishing innovation ecosystem, uh, conducting an analysis to investigate how many PhDs do you need?
hmm,
How many extension agents do you need? You have to invest in that for you to come up with the right environment that will attract the private sector. So the private sectors,
yeah.
it's not like they don't see it as potential. They
Okay.
see it, but they avoid the risks. So
Mm,
you have to de-risk agricultural research for development. And of course, there are efforts. I am part of what is known as TAT, Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation. So
yeah.
this is a program funded by the African Development Bank that seeks to take technology from the laboratories of IITA, of CIMIT, all these big international centers, bring those technologies to the end users. And then it gives loans to countries, including Nigeria, to
Mm,
implement their agricultural plan. But it comes with the TAT program to de-risk that agricultural practice. You understand what I'm saying? So
yeah.
if you
We
want
can.
to have private sector in agriculture massively investing, you have to de-risk it, because the business of entrepreneur is making money and really creating wealth.
Yeah.
And there's a journey ongoing, but it's still not enough. And each of us at different levels, from household level to the ward level to the state level, we can play our part. We can do uh,
Yeah.
what we need to do, to contribute. It's a long journey, but it's still possible.
Exactly. Well, I think we kind of the discussion is really interesting, and we cannot defy the fact that our speaker today has immense wealth of experience at all levels, trying to demystify what is really happening. And we have even gone over time to our on plans. I don't know. We have
No
few.
problem.
Yeah. So let's move into the next segment of today's talk, and it's to talk about leadership and innovation, which we have started to talk. but we're gonna talk it like judiciously now. In case you are joining us now, this is the podcast hosted by Science Communication Hub Nigeria, and together we are with Dr. Abdul Razak Ibrahim, who is speaking about agriculture, about technology, and the future of Nigeria and Africa in terms of food security and sustainability. So, Africa Foresight Academy.
Mhm.
What does this academy stand for?
All right. So in FARA, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, which, like I said, is a continental organization supporting the work of the African Union on matters related to agriculture, science, technology, and innovation.
Mm,
Uh, we identified this gap in planning across board all over Africa, and and that is somehow why so many development programs and national investment plans have been failing.
mm,
So recognizing that, FARA established the Africa Foresight Academy, which tries to prepare Africa not just for the next planting season, but for the next 50 years. So our work is to equip policymakers, researchers, entrepreneurs with tools to think strategically, through scenario planning, trend analysis, strategic visioning. So it's about proactive leadership, not reactive crisis management. So we were having a conversation, and I gave you an example of, imagine today in Kano. I'm from Kano, so I give the example of Kano.
yeah.
Imagine today, Kano state government sits down and conducts a foresight analysis on the future of youth in the light of rising crime, or youth banditry, or
Mm,
drug addiction, for example, drug abuse. So we can have a stakeholder in which everyone is in the room, the youth themselves, parents, ulama, teachers, professors, researchers. We come up using the foresight tool. We can imagine four possible scenarios that could happen in the next 20 years. We could say we can have a scenario A where every young man in Kano has become a drug abuser. That's the worst case scenario, right?
mm,
You
yeah.
can have another one in which, we have managed to control and curb the situation.
Mm,
Another one, sort of intermediary, and another scenario. Then from those stakeholders, you can identify the triggers, what we call triggers and drivers, that will lead to those different scenarios, and map them. And in the end, you will come up with, let me call it a graph, that will show you exactly what you need to do today, tomorrow, and the coming 20, 30 days to
mm,
get to this future. So it's a kind of preparing for the future. And you can apply it not just to drug abuse, for it. You can apply it to everything, to
everything.
agriculture, to development, to road transport. You can apply it to urban rural migration. You can apply it to domestic violence. You can apply it on everything. And it has worked. Everything you see coming from Europe, for example, the US, every policy, every strategy is well grounded in foresight. The
Mm,
foresight as a methodology itself was actually invented by Shell, the petroleum development company.
yeah,
They invented, and today, probably the most successful, uh,
exactly.
energy company globally, right? So they
Mm,
invented the methodology of foresight, and it works. It's not magic. So through the work, that we do in foresight, I myself, actually, I would not consider myself a foresight expert. I'm learning, but we have trained several foresight champions across Africa. We have launched country level hubs. We've launched 13 uh, foresight hubs in West and Central Africa sub-region, 7 in
mm,
Southern Africa. We're going into East Africa. We just came back from Nigeria. We had one recently. It's sort of an interactive foresight exercise in Nigeria, looking at the cadre. So a key success in this work that we're doing is we need to see foresight being integrated into policy making so that
Yeah.
governments are thinking about 2030, 2050, not the
So,
next election, but you
so
know
in this foresight and the programs the kind of widespread you're talking about now, is the foresight only concerned to agriculture, or like it's just something that is general?
so
What you mean now?
so foresight can be applied broadly across board.
Yeah.
Banks, a lot of banks use it,
Mm.
but like I said during our private chat, you know, agriculture is the largest employer in Africa across board. I think it's about 60% of Africa's population is employed in agriculture.
Hmm.
We have the largest arable land globally, I think about
Yeah.
80, 60% also. We have the largest freshwater
Mm.
globally. So clearly, our pathway to transformation, our pathway to economic empowerment is through agriculture. And nowhere has it worked in the world without applying science. India was able to achieve, the green revolution. This is what they call the green revolution. They even had the white revolution. I don't know if you know the white revolution in India. It's the revolution of milk.
No.
India, yeah, India has the largest community-based milk enterprise. That I was there at Amul is a milk enterprise, the
Hmm.
largest globally. They're able to attain sustainable supply of milk. So they have done it, and they did it through science. It does not happen with magic. It has to
It
be
doesn't.
deliberate.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
It's
has to be.
deliberately calculated,
Yeah,
and you said the foresight has to be there as well.
exactly. In Brazil, they've attained it. Brazil moved from being a net importer to next exporter of beef, of fruits, of vegetables. Today, globally, they're food secure. So that's why foresight is very, very critical in the agricultural sector in
Yeah.
Africa because we need to apply
Yeah.
it. And you will
Exactly.
hear a lot of talk about food systems transformation. People are talking about that. It's the foundational tool required to attain that transformation is, is, is partly foresight.
Hmm. So let's take kind of an exemplary scenario, like in what is happening in Nigeria. Because growing up in Nigeria, even though I'm kind of from the young people, which would definitely I don't have much of history pertaining to the food security and sustainability in Nigeria. We can, but it's just the evidence is just palpable that we can say that the situation of people be able to feed themselves either as peasants or like working class, and we're looking at like large percentage of people in agricultural sector. Can we say that the foresight in Nigeria is not working? Because things the graph is going down, not up, when it comes to food security.
Yeah, you know, the, you remember in the beginning of the program, I said, I have learned that the best way to approach problems really is not to focus
On the
or to
problem.
complain,
Yeah.
but really in your own space, try to contribute, because the challenge is quite huge, and no, it's not something that only
Can
one
do.
government do. So what we need
Mm.
is collective action. More consciousness. There's a need for collective action so that when I speak about foresight, for example, or when I speak about GM crops,
Yeah.
we are all on the same table. We all understand that we're moving towards a certain journey to bring about transformation. So this progress has been recorded, but also our population keeps rising at the same time. So you see, so
Yeah.
the multidimensional nature of the problem does not allow you to offer a simplistic answer
Mm.
to questions like this. So there's only much that you can do, and I will say that you cannot afford to be complacent. I mean, you have to really. We have to continue to engage,
mm,
communicate, and continue to speak to each other so that we can attain that food and
oh,
nutrition security that's
yeah,
required.
yeah, and I really enjoy the kind of what you said about complaining things and always kind of focusing on the challenge rather than and focus on seeing it as a challenge and should be motivation to do positive work because
Yeah,
it's a thing, especially with the younger population in Nigeria, and that is why we host people like you to discuss this kind of burning questions and the right approach to solving our own problems rather than speaking the challenges, but we should try to implement ways, seek for mentors, learn how to do things the proper way in order
mhm.
to be able to solve our own problems by our own selves. Thank you very much. So, I know you've had a lot of mentees because with the Foresight Academy, with the progress, with a lot of things. What have your mentees did that made you really proud personally?
Oh, they amaze me. I consider myself really quite fortunate and privileged. Alhamdulillah. You know, you remember I mentioned earlier that I stand on the shoulders of others, right? A lot
Yeah.
of people, several people, right from primary school all the way to the here and now. You you lean on others. People support you. So uh, some of my mentees actually have gone to lead groundbreaking research. Others have launched startups tackling food waste to climate smart farming. A few have moved to high level advisory roles, influencing policy, agriculture. So I think when mentees start to mentor others, you know that the impact of your own little contribution is multiplying. So
Mm,
so basically the idea is to continue to support, not just be the mentee myself, but also point at other linkages, other mentors, right?
have
That
an
can
empire, a network, that
exactly.
the innovative ecosystem
Sure.
of people interconnected to solve our own problems because
That's right.
yeah, we really need that. In case you are joining us now, we are coming to the end of this segment on leadership and innovation. And we host today scholar Dr. Abdulrazak Ibrahim, who is a molecular biologist and also a diplomacy practitioner that has immense experience in African Union, in the university, and lots of training as well. So I don't know. Let's go to the chat to see if we will have some few questions. And the first thing that came here is from the last speaker, which is really interesting because he's a policymaker, and that is from Dr. Ibrahim Musa, and he is also the advisor to the governor. I hope he's listening and he's listening to our own conversation, and especially the foresight. We need the foresight. So he said, "Great talk. How do you see Nigeria leveraging the GMO to conquer hunger and malnutrition? Secondly, biotech is increasingly defining healthcare and diagnostics. Is there a way to have a local approach for developing these expensive biologics? Finally, what is the plan for mentoring young people in Kura and Kano for your path?" Wow, that's a lot of questions, and I will leave you to discuss.
So those are three questions, in one. So the first is
Yeah.
about leveraging agricultural biotechnology. I think, like I said during the in the beginning, Nigeria is in a leadership role right now when you talk about agricultural biotechnology. We are among the tier one countries that have actually advanced in terms of not only strengthening our local capacity, we have a large number of community of practice of biotechnologists in Nigeria that are doing excellent job. You go to NABDA or NABAD now, you go to IR in Buzaria, some of them connecting to IATA, the great work that people like Dr. Rose Gidado on the team, Professor Ishaku in ABU Zaire, they're doing, developing cowpea that's resistant to virus, developing cotton that's resistant to cornworm disease, maize that is also that's tolerant to drought. So these are some of the really frontline improved varieties that are already coming out in the market. So Nigeria is already leveraging on that. And beyond that, we have a very sound, I dare say, regulatory framework for regulating their release. Uh, because of the need to build public trust in the way that these technologies are developed and disseminated, you have to have regulation. You have to put a biosafety regulation. Typically, for example, if you have a biotech program that says this is a maize variety that is highly rich in, let's say, vitamin A, and you want to take it to the farmers, it takes an average 13 years of research.
13.
Yes, on average. You
Wow.
have to pass through a series of regulation, back crossing breeding program, testing in laboratory rats, to make sure that there's no off-target effect, and so on. So Nigeria has that very solid regulatory framework. So we are leveraging on it. And beyond that, even more importantly, like I said, because there are new technologies now emerging that do not require that sort of regulatory stringency, like the gene edited crops.
Yeah.
So uh, we have improved our biosafety law to also encompass that. So I think we're doing well, but I will call on, a call for action, more investment in terms of our building our capacity, investment in infrastructure, electricity, solar, and all of that. So that's it. Now the second part of the question, which is about the intersection with the health sector. This really quite a lot. These days we talk about One Health framework. The One Health framework is such approach that looks at agriculture, not just as agriculture, but also medicine. So you have to look at the intersection between the human health, animal health, and agriculture, that practice. So there are products coming out of the market right now. In fact, just two weeks ago, my colleagues in the same laboratory I was trained, they came up with a new research, with a new lettuce that is gene edited lettuce that has 4 times more folic acid than normal lettuce. So this means women that are of pregnancy age can consume this lettuce without having to take the folic acid that they normally take. Affordable, very easy solution. It's eaten fresh, so you don't cook it
It's a
because,
vegetable.
yeah, the vitamin A is sorry, the folic acid is heat labile. So that's one aspect. So there are other people looking at aspects of sickle cell anemia, for example. I
Mhm.
remember my colleagues in ABU Zaria, Professor Inua, was able to contribute in identifying a sorghum variety that contains uh, some some bioactive compound which reduces the sickling effect uh, of the blood in sickle cell, uh,
Oh.
in the case of sickle cell anemia. So that's something that can really be scaled,
Mm.
and the potentials are quite enormous. So I think that's that. Hopefully, I've not forgotten. But the last part is about mentoring. You
Yeah.
know, recently I just saw. I think 2 3 days ago, someone posted on Facebook that he's charging $18,000 to $20,000 for mentorship program.
Wow.
We all held our heads. This is crazy. And so someone commented. So basically, mentorship is about really giving back to the society.
Mm.
And not only that, is as we say in Hausa, and I'm sorry I have to say this in Hausa, it's like
Yeah.
you okay, you do it for your own self.
Mm.
Because really when you mentor people from your community, what you're doing is reducing the potential burden of poverty that may come, but that may end up on you, right? If that community does not have the critical mass educated enough, to address
Mm.
their own issues. So I personally, as much as possible, I I try to support, and I have a whole folder in my computer with each mentee with his or her folder, with the details, connecting them with opportunities, scholarship, linking them with opportunities for employment, and so on. There are various networks of young people where they interact and really learn to learn to be better citizens, better people. And I would say to Dr. Ibrahim, I'm of course always open to support my own, from Kano, Nigeria, or anywhere in the world. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's really great. And uh, what the way you answered this question, it just resonates in me that a lot has been happening in the in the laboratories in Nigeria, especially when it comes to developing of crops that can withstand the harshness of our environment and to be able to provide us with sustainability. And what we are liking is that is a lot of probably the communication is not as great as it's supposed to be, and maybe I don't know whether the implementation when it comes to the farmers, which we will need government policies to guide it, and we everything is just going back to the ecosystem you just described. And I hope we will be able to have a solution to that as soon as possible.
So let me just interject there. There's a solution actually to this fragmented nature of doing things, and the
Beautiful.
solution comes in what we call integrated agricultural research for development. Previously, traditionally, what people do is, I'm a lecturer in a university. I have my own line of research, and I sit down and give project topics to my students. They go and do the research, they bring the result, they defend their project or master's or PhD thesis, and I publish my papers and I become professor.
Yeah.
Now, so that's the linear way of doing research. The
Hmm.
integrated agricultural research for development method is such that you bring people together. So if I am a scientist in my lab, I will go to the Meungwa, in the
Hmm.
neighborhood, say in
Yeah.
Zaria. I go to the Meungwa of Zaria.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm in urban and regional planning unit, and then I go to the Meungwa and sit down and say, okay, there are issues related to urban population, urban hygiene, or maybe breakout of disease here, or mosquito. Let's bring people from Access Bank, people from the Traders Association, the women group, the youth group, we, the lecturers, we come back. Let's identify what is actually what is one thing that we can do that can improve our living standards. So that can be a problem around agriculture, it could be a problem around nutrition or technology, or problem of transportation. So with that as a research question, you go back to the lab and do the research, and you carry them along, and you communicate as you advance. We do this using the integrated research for development approach. And in FARA, what we have been advocating for is this. We use an instrument called innovation platform. So it's almost permanent group of people coming together around a common problem. So maybe bakers, group of bakers in Kano having a group with the wheat growers and transporters, people selling yeast, all of
Hmm.
them coming together, working with the nutritionist, working with food technologists in the same space, trying to address the problem of bread making in Kano.
Hmm.
So this is how innovation platform works. And they register themselves as a legal entity, and they continue to interact, they do research, come up with a solution. That way you communicate research, you communicate impact, you transmit trust. People really get to see the value of investing in science. So it's part
Yeah.
of the things that we do in FARA and in the work that I
Wow.
do, and we can continue to do it.
I'm really amazed by this framework, and I hope that Ibrahim is close by so that he invites you to Kano, and we'll look to invite you probably
No, no, we'll be in
to
Kano we will
in
be
your
in Kano, and
because
he knows we'll be in Kano. next week, in about 2 weeks from now, we're going to set up innovation platforms. Actually, we're working with the Center for Dryland Agriculture
Right.
in the
Oh,
UK. Yeah, hopefully we can have the Kano State government also participating in that.
great. That would be great. And we want to have a lot of people know about that, because the most important thing is the community appreciates the kind of work you do and the trusts. And we hope
Yeah,
that science communication will be monitoring your moves and post you as well, because we want to
sure, sure.
get
Please do
awareness.
come in. Mm.
Yeah.
You know, we have been to we've been to all over Africa actually with this concept. I can say we have established over 700 innovation platforms from Tanzania to Rwanda to Guinea-Bissau, all over
Wow.
Africa, Madagascar, and it's through this project that's funded by the African Development Bank,
Hmm.
and so I feel really very privileged to be part of this transformation journey and story. And hopefully, I think more countries will take up the idea because, for it to gain traction, there has to be ownership, local ownership.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see, for example, 200 innovation platforms established in Kano by the Kano people themselves, or in Jigawa, or Benue, or Cross River,
Yobe States.
because the more innovation platforms you have, the more you have a scientifically conscious community that understands the economics of the problem at hand and how to really scale through and transform and bring about that economic transformation that we all desire, which ensures that, there's more food on the table, more
Hmm.
people, young and old, are employed, there's
Yeah.
food security, we have healthier people so they don't end up, traveling across the Mediterranean Sea or getting duped to go to Sudan or any of these countries in the name of looking for, greener pasture. There are enormous opportunities that you can harness when you bring together this multi-stakeholder approach to a problem, whether it's agriculture or in health or otherwise.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm just mesmerized. And thank you for sharing that, Prof. Yeah. So this is question from Muhammad Mustafa. He said, "Thank you, Prof, for this wonderful talk. Nigeria struggles with post-harvest losses. How can biotechnology help reduce food waste?"
All right. So again, I'm from Kura, and if you know Kura, you know that we're part of the agricultural,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
backbone of Kano. So, and it is in my community, around my own community, that I see every year, the amount of waste that goes from the growing of tomato, right? There's a lot of every year I see our farmers how, at certain point they sell tomato very expensive, another point they sell it very, very cheap as a result of that lack of post-harvest management losses. There are technologies to preserve tomato. There are technologies to grow tomato every season. In Cuba, for example, they grow it not just on farmland, they grow it in the lab, in a space like this, in a room. And you can have tomatoes as huge as the human head. So there are different approaches to address the problem of post-harvest losses. One of them is to ensure that you have an all the year round supply of the commodity, stabilization of the price, preservation methods. Some of them they can even be traditional. So
Hmm.
biotechnology is only one of the tools that can contribute in, reducing that food waste. And again, I make the point that biotechnology is not a magic bullet
It's not a
on
magic
it.
book.
There are really other other tools that we can deploy to 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 check it. One of them, for example, is the use of cold stores, right? You can
Hmm.
establish receptacles, cold stores. Another one is using a tissue culture facility, to propagate so that you have constant supply of the seed and so on. So there are ways to address uh, this waste, and biotech is one of them. But it
Yeah,
takes coming together and agreeing, and having that
exactly.
common, yeah, vision.
Yes. Yeah. I think knowledge is key to everything.
Sure.
So this, I know we have had a lot of talks on GMOs, but this one seems to be like saying that the genetically modified, probably you want to say crops, might lead to mutation and some genetic disorders. What is the scientific fact behind this, and how will you advise young individuals towards successful career in the field of biotechnology with biochemistry background in Nigeria? So yeah, the young
Okay.
ones are the platform, which is beautiful.
Yes. So now let me ask you: do you know how many mutations, how many people have been, affected with mutation as a result of consuming genetically modified crops?
No, 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 no,
You don't have no idea, right?
no.
Zero, zero, none. And we have been using humans have been using genetically modified organisms over hundreds of years.
Hmm. Of
Over
course.
hundreds of years in Brazil, in the US, even now, if you step into ShopRite and you buy maybe some of the, but we have been consuming these things, with zero impact. But you can find fault with anything if you insist in finding fault. You can find fault in drinking water. You can say this is the negative effect of drinking water. This is how much water you can consume to fall sick. So what I'm saying is that the scientific literature is clear. There's no
Yeah,
evidence that GMOs can cause any harm.
yeah.
I mentioned to you that the time spent in releasing a genetically modified organism is on average 13 years. Maybe it
Yes.
has reduced now because we have advanced in technology, and now
Mm,
with AI we are even advancing. So there's a lot of rigor in the way that these products are generated. I myself actually in the letters that I generated, I ran an analysis that we call off-target analysis, which is, you want to check what is the likelihood that what you're producing can have a negative impact, not just on humans, but also in the environment and so on. So,
mm,
so really, there's no harmful effect. I would say GMO is as harmful as any non-GMO crop if you
yeah.
misuse it.
Hmm.
All right.
Talking of that, if we
So
see
that's
anything that has to do with evolution will have been mutated from certain form to another.
exactly.
This is
So
just
so he's asking what is behind this. So really that's it. It's if you allow uh, evolution to take place at some point, we
yeah.
ourselves are evolving, right?
Mhm.
Agriculture itself, and I say this often. There's nothing natural about agriculture.
Mm,
Agriculture was invented
yeah.
some 4 or 5 thousand years ago. There was no agriculture. People lived in the wild and they just consumed what was in the wild. But our ancestors, with time, they learned to domesticate crops, they learned to crossbreed, they
Mm,
learned to select crops, and then they cross them so that if you see the ancestor of maize, it's called teosint. It is some blackish seed that has nothing to do in terms of looks with maize, but maize originated from it. So but it's because humans, intervened in nature and domesticated this. What dogs?
mm,
There was a time we had no dogs. So it's a domestication process that has been happening, and what we do in during molecular breeding is to speed up this process that could
this process.
probably happen in nature.
Yes.
Now, the second part of his question is about, the advice to young people. I would say, please, okay, I'm going to tell you this, especially to those who are already in school. There's no point that you go to a class you take a course and then you score C, you
Hmm.
have to prohibit yourself from getting anything below B. That's the starting point. That's the secret. One of the secrets to success is to ensure that you graduate with either first class or 2-1.
Hmm.
Number one. Number two, when you attend lectures, do not go to sleep without mastering that very lecture that day. You really need to make sure that everything that has been taught that day, and this I'm addressing the very young people that are in university and schools now,
Yeah.
do not ever go to sleep without understanding what the lecturer or the teacher has taught you that day, and then prohibit yourself from getting anything below B. This has worked everywhere. So that's where your potential starts, because that's the difference between getting a job and not getting it in many places. Number two, there are enormous opportunities. One of the fields that I encourage people that have studied biochemistry these days to take is environmental management science, impact analysis, uh, issues around bioinformatics, the use of AI, to design and engineer biological systems, and so on. So there are so many opportunities that we can leverage on. But the starting point is to make sure that you have a good result. Learn English also, learn the language. There's a reason why, for example, AI is called, some of the AI's systems, they are called LLM, right?
Yeah.
Large language model. It's because you need to understand the language to communicate the logic, to internalize the logic of whatever it is you're learning, whether it is chemistry or even Arabic.
Yeah.
Learn
The
the
language.
language. Be really very good at it, and then uh, there are many other soft skills, that can follow. That's the starting point.
Wow. So I hope our the youngsters in university have kind of taken note of this and building their morale and motivation towards getting better results. So this is coming rather opinionated question from Zainab Ali, and she's opinionated that what do you think is the reason why most awesome transgenic plants are not sustained? They exist for a few years and disappear.
Really? Do they disappear?
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I say it's opinionated. So I don't know whether
No,
the opinion
I don't
holds good.
really. No, I do not think that they disappear. What happens is that problems change. So today you might have problem of pest of a particular species, and then the next day you could have problem with another species. So today could be bacteria, another day could be virus, And so these things are usually shaped also by the market. What does the
Mm,
market require? So whether it is soybean or cassava or sugarcane, is dictated by the market demands. What is required for for the sugarcane industry? There's certain variety of sugarcane that is needed. So uh, there's preference to that. But maybe if there's a breakout in disease, you need to have a resistant variety to that disease. And by the time you establish that resistance, right, you can move to other maybe naturally there will always be environmental challenges coming up. We're biologists, we know that
yeah.
things are subject to the laws of entropy, and so there's always these changes that can cause shifts in the ecosystem that can trigger uh, coronavirus, for example, or
Mm,
another pandemic, and so on. So I do not think that these species or these plants disappear from the market.
rather, maybe you
Uh,
have
I
influence.
haven't seen it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just something about research and technology. It moves really fast,
yeah.
and
It's evolving.
really it's evolving. New things come to place, other things. So this one is kind of a little bit shifting away from plants now, From Kasim Muhammad, he said, "Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Is there any effort being made to improve the laying performance of our local chickens?" I don't know whether
Hmm.
the question you know, and that is a
Very interesting
successful
question.
one as well.
Well, I'm not in the breeding, avian breeding aspect, but I know that in animal science units across, in NAPRI, I think in
Mm,
Zaria, they have a center for for that. I'm sure they do have some very improved varieties that can. Most of the problems of these technologies, they do not get to the end users be- because there's no delivery infrastructure that I mentioned. You
mm.
need to bring those people. Researchers will do their work and then they publish it and it stays there on the shelf.
Yeah,
You know,
that's a
there's
very
need
big
for
problem.
investment. Mm. There's need to invest in a process that will lead to scaling of those technologies. So and that's part of the work that TAT, which I also impart, I'm a part of, is doing scaling agricultural technologies
Mm,
to the end users. Um, Unfortunately, we're not working on chickens. Among It's not part of the commodity. Partially, I think, because the poultry business is already, all over. It's something you can easily. A lot of people are doing it, so uh, it may not require as much as attention as, say, cassava, for example, or fish. Maybe
mm.
the international market also. So there are a number of factors, but I'm sure that there are programs that are trying to address this performance. I remember many years ago, a colleague of mine from a university in Ileife, he um, he worked with some Brazilian researchers to generate a breed of uh, layers, and I know for a fact that in Obafemi Awolowo University, no, not Obafemi. Which one is in Abeokuta?
Oh,
FUNAB, yeah,
okay.
Federal University of Agriculture in Abeokuta. They do have, I think, to my knowledge, one of the best performing chickens in Africa,
Mm.
or let me say in Nigeria. I've been to the
Is that where
space.
you have the farm of late, former president of Nigeria,
Yeah,
Olusegun
he's
Obasanjo?
from there. He's from there. He
Okay,
has a farm in
okay,
Qatar.
from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Mm.
So Kasim, right? That's the person
Yes,
asking question.
yeah.
So in case you're interested, I can actually link you up with the researchers doing this work on this.
Okay, great. So
On
you can have a follow up. We can provide
Sure.
you with the email address of the prof, and he will
Yeah.
send you an email. Yeah, there are a lot of questions, but some I believe the things we have answered, and
Mhm.
we have spent over about 30
Hour.
minutes dealing with just answering questions, which is really interesting. And I'm really glad to have kind of go through these questions. It means that the listeners have kind of been following our discussion today, and people are eager to learn and eager to learn from mentors and people that have vast experience. This is about 20 years of experience that is been summarized in just an hour. So I hope it's even the time is too little for that. But nonetheless, we thank everyone for being patient with us and have stayed to probably the last segment of the podcast this month, where we hosted the Dr. Abdurazak Ibrahim, who is a molecular biologist as well as an agriculturist and as well as a policymaker with immense experience in African policy, in agricultural implementation and policy, has funded a lot of agencies have worked through the years to the betterment of our communities. And if you want to learn more about him, you can just Google him. A lot is been said about him and his wonderful work. And he's gonna be in Kano in the next 2 weeks. Probably we're gonna cover some segment about that. And we hope to see him personally. I have to be biased here. We hope to see you doing something in your state.
My
That's what we
people will be. There's no guarantee that I'll be there. Yes.
we will have to lobby then. Yeah, so this is just something, the future of the last take home I would like to end this program with. And as a thinker, which scientists are trained thinkers. What bothers you every day in that morning shower? Like the morning shower you take is when you have the raisin thoughts kind of going through your minds. I wanted to come building a lot of castles in the air. What is that kind of like the something that bothers you every day about our country, Nigeria?
Well, what bothers me is whether the water is hot enough. The water in the shower, whether it's hot enough. Yeah. Well, seriously, really what bothers me
Hmm,
is seeing so much brilliance wasted
hmm,
because of poor systems or because of fear or short-term thinking. There's so much brilliance within us, in Nigeria, in Africa. A lot of people, have you interacted with young people these days? You feel their energy, you feel the vibrancy, you can literally feel their curiosity. They're quite brilliant. They're able to decode things, you can learn from them. We talk about mentorship,
hmm,
mentoring young people. Of course, you can share with them knowledge in terms of the the life lessons that you have learned as a result of your journey. But we also have a lot to learn from young people because of the world that has been created for them over the last, let me say, 30, 50 years, So, what bothers me is when I see a lot of young people with a lot of brilliance wasting that brilliance in things that really do not matter, things that will not lead to progress. A lot of lethargy, to learning, to open mindedness, to progress, to collective thinking, to transformative ideas, to
hmm,
building community, to creating wealth. They miss the point because there's no system. The system around them is poor, or there's a lot of fear in it, or there's short-term thinking in the way, in the environment that they operate. So every morning for me is, how do we unlock the collective genius of Africa? So how do we unlock the collective genius of the people, of the young people, the young minds in Kano? We
hmm.
do it sustainably, ethically, and boldly. So I would say that for me is what
Yeah,
bothers me
yeah,
every
and that
morning.
is and
In
that is
addition
hard.
to the hot water.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if it is in the winter. Yeah, thank you for that statement. And well, at the end, we have to wrap this thing up. And I would like to thank everyone that have been patient with us since the beginning of this talk up to the end. And we hope that you will leave the session or the studio today with having learning or having got inspiration for an idea or two and having planned a path to be able to develop yourself and better yourself. And the end point is for the collective goodness to have innovative ecosystem to be able to develop our own society. On behalf of everyone that have worked hard to see this to bring this segment to you, and I, Zaid Muhammad from the Science Communication Hub Nigeria, say goodbye and join us next time for another interesting and brilliant talk. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Zaid. Yeah. Thank you.